"Sir, my mama's bones are broken. She can't take more pain." The sound carried no farther than the edge of the trail, swallowed by the wind's low moan. But then came the distant rhythm of hooves, slow, deliberate, unhurried like a man who never rushed for anyone. Through the haze of drizzle, the rider appeared. A tall figure on a dark horse, coat heavy with dust, brim of his hat pulled low. He didn't look like Mercy at first. He looked like the kind of man who built fences high and hearts higher. But when he saw the girl, he slowed. His horse snorted, steam spilling into the damp air. He swung down and crouched beside her. His voice, when it came, was rough as gravel. "Where's your ma, little one?" The girl pointed toward the wagon. Inside, a woman lay half-covered with a blanket that had once been blue but was now the color of sorrow. Her hair was tangled with straw, her eyes half open, dazed. She looked too young to have a child so old, too frail to still be alive. One arm was bound against her chest with a strip of torn linen. The man knelt, lifting the blanket gently. He didn't flinch at the smell of dried blood or the way her ribs rose uneven beneath her shirt. "You hurt bad, ma'am," he murmured. Her lips moved with effort. "My husband, her breath hitched. He and his brothers said I slowed the wagon. Threw me off with the girl." He nodded once, not asking her name yet. The girl tugged at his sleeve, her voice small but sure. "Please don't leave us, sir. I can walk, but Mama can't." He looked between them, the child, the woman, the gray road that stretched into nothing, and made a decision with the same stillness that marked all his choices. He slid his arms beneath the woman's shoulders, lifting her as if she were made of feathers, not pain. She gasped but didn't fight him. He placed her on his horse, steadying her with one hand, and turned to the girl. "You ride behind her. Hold on." She nodded fiercely, climbing up, her small hands gripping her mother's waist. The man, Liam Anderson, though they didn't yet know his name, led the horse through the muck. His boots sank deep, each step a quiet promise. Behind them, the wagon sagged into the earth until it looked like a grave. The sky dimmed as they reached the foothills. Pine needles glistened with meltwater, and the smell of wood smoke drifted from somewhere unseen. When they arrived at his ranch, a modest cabin pressed against the land like an apology, he didn't speak much. He carried the woman inside, laid her near the hearth, and fed the fire until it burned bright and clean. The girl, still clutching his coat, stared around in silence. There was no woman's touch here, just the plain neatness of a man who did things the same way every day. He poured hot water into a basin and fetched a tin of salve. "What's her name?" he asked softly. "Laura," the girl said. "I'm Lydia." He nodded again. "Then let's see what we can fix, Lydia." Through the night, the cabin filled with the smell of liniment and smoke. The rain tapped softly against the window. Liam's hands were steady as he cleaned Laura's wounds, splinted her arm, and wrapped her ribs with strips of linen cut from an old shirt. He didn't say much, but every motion carried the patience of a man who'd learned long ago that words often made things worse. Laura drifted in and out of sleep. Once she opened her eyes and studied his face, the square jaw, the scar across his temple, the line of exhaustion beneath his eyes. "You don't even know us," she whispered. "Don't need to," he said. "You were hurt." She turned her head away, tears pooling where the light caught them. Lydia had fallen asleep by then, curled by the hearth, her tiny hand resting on the hem of his coat as if claiming it for safety. When dawn came, pale and clean, Liam stepped outside to gather water from the creek. The air was sharp, scented with wet grass. The mountains looked close enough to touch, their peaks still veiled with snow. He watched a hawk glide low over the valley before turning back to the cabin. Inside, Laura was awake. She tried to sit but winced. He set the bucket down and crouched beside her. "You'll need weeks, maybe more," he said quietly. "I can't stay," she answered, voice trembling. "My husband, he'll come looking." "Let him look," Liam said. His tone carried no heat, just weight. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He'll kill you." He rose and walked to the window. Outside, the land stretched endless and calm, as if no cruelty could ever reach it. But he knew better. He'd seen men kill for less than pride. "Maybe so," he said. "But you'll rest first." She watched him for a long time, the way his shoulders filled the light, how he moved like a man accustomed to silence. Something softened in her expression. No one had stood between her and pain in years. Later, while Lydia helped stir cornmeal on the stove, Laura tried to speak again. "Why are you alone, Mr. Anderson?" "Liam Anderson." She nodded faintly. "Lost my folks early. Then my wife. That was years back." "How did she?" He cut her off gently. "Fever took her and the boy." He didn't look at her when he said it. Some things a man said only to keep ghosts quiet. The day passed slow and golden. By evening, Lydia laughed for the first time, a small, startled sound when Liam showed her how to feed a lamb. Laura smiled faintly at the sound, like someone remembering music. But the peace felt thin, as if the wind might tear it apart. At dusk, Liam saddled his horse and rode into town for medicine. The general store's porch creaked under his weight as he approached. The owner, a short man with a hawk's face, eyed him warily. "Word travels fast on the plains." "Heard you brought some strays to your place, Anderson," the man said. Liam didn't answer. He placed coins on the counter for bandages and whiskey. "You best be careful," the man added. "Folks don't like trouble wandering in." Liam met his gaze. Trouble's just another word for someone else's hurt. He rode home under a sky streaked violet and gray, his jaw tight. The first stars blinked awake as the cabin came into view, warm light spilling from the windows. For a fleeting second, he thought maybe that light meant safety. Inside, Laura slept soundly, her arm bound neatly, the fire whispering low. Lydia stirred awake when he entered, rubbing her eyes. "Did you find the stars, Mr. Anderson?" She mumbled. He smiled faintly. "Not tonight, little one." She leaned against him, half asleep. "Mama says stars are angels watching." "Maybe they are," he said. "Maybe they're just people we couldn't keep." When she drifted back to sleep, he watched the fire, the way its light traced Laura's face, pale, fragile, alive. Outside, thunder rolled far off in the hills. He felt it in his bones before he heard it. From somewhere beyond the dark ridge, a horse cried out, then silence. He rose, hand on the doorframe, scanning the horizon. Nothing but wind and the faint smell of smoke. He stood there a long time, the quiet pressing in like a warning. Then he shut the door, set the rifle by the wall, and whispered to no one, "They'll come. They always do." The fire crackled softly in answer, painting the room gold as the storm gathered its breath beyond the hills. By mid-April, the land began to thaw for good. The creek that once whispered now sang, swelling with melted snow. Tiny blades of grass, green as promise, poked through the brown earth beside the fence line. The cabin no longer smelled of smoke and medicine, but of something warmer, cornbread, soap, the quiet rhythm of life reassembling itself. Yet, beneath that peace, an unease waited, crouched like a wolf in the timberline. Laura moved slower than the season. Her arm had mended, but her ribs still ached when she bent to gather water. Every movement reminded her that her body had been broken by someone who claimed to love her. Sometimes, when she saw her reflection in the basin, she didn't recognize the woman looking back. The faint bruises yellowing across her collarbone, the streak of gray beginning near her temple. Pain had made her older than her years, and yet, there was a gentleness that Liam could not name, something unyielding under all that quiet. He watched her from the porch that morning, hammering a loose board, the wind carrying her hum as she hung a line of washing between two birch trees. Lydia chased a chicken through the grass, laughing like the sound of water skipping over stones. For a man who had known only silence, the noise of them felt both foreign and holy. He had not meant to keep them. That first night was supposed to be a mercy stop, a night shelter, a few meals, then he'd send them east to the next settlement. But each dawn, the thought of them leaving seemed heavier. He told himself they weren't strong enough yet. That was half a lie. The truth was simpler. The house didn't feel so empty now. The town, however, noticed. Dry Creek was a small place, proud of its gossip and its god. By the third week, The whispers reached even the farthest cabin. A widow and her child living alone with Liam Anderson, the reclusive rancher whose wife died under mysterious fever and whose voice folks claimed could still a barking dog. Some said pity had softened him. Others said sin had. On the first Sunday of May, a carriage arrived up the hill. Dust trailed it like accusation. Mrs. Clancy, the storekeeper's wife, climbed out dressed in lavender, lips pursed tight enough to squeeze rain from a stone. Liam met her halfway down the path, wiping his hands on a rag. She greeted him with a smile that wasn't. "Mr. Anderson," she began, in that tone women use when they pretend to care. "Folks been asking after you. Wondering if you've been keeping good company." He said nothing, just waited. She pressed on, glancing toward the cabin door. "I hear there's a woman up here, a Mrs. Callan, and a child. Now, you've always been a decent man, Liam, and no one wants talk to turn ugly. But these things, well, they stain faster than ink." He leaned against the fence post. "Her husband left her to die. You call that decent talk?" Mrs. Clancy stiffened. "I call it a matter for law and preacher, not for a single man living miles from both." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe the law and preacher should have found her before I did." Her cheeks flushed, her voice turning brittle. "People will think." He cut her off with the kind of silence that makes people hear themselves too loud. When she finally turned back toward her carriage, her perfume hung in the air like judgment. Laura had watched from the window. She said nothing when he came in, only poured him coffee. He took it, nodded his thanks. But she could feel the tension between them, thin as wire, strong as fear. "You shouldn't defend me," she whispered. "It'll bring you trouble." "Already have trouble," he said softly. "Might as well make it worthwhile." That night, he found her sitting by the fire after Lydia had gone to bed. Her hands rested on her knees, palms open as if asking warmth for forgiveness. "When you helped us," she said, "did you know what it would cost?" "Didn't think on it." "You should have." He stared into the flames, jaw tightening. "Maybe. But I've been alone long enough to know a quiet house ain't worth the peace it keeps." She turned toward him then, really seeing him. The scars on his knuckles, the faint tremor in his hand from an old wound that never healed right. There was a sadness in him she recognized, the kind that grows from too much burying. The next week brought rain again. It came soft, steady, the kind that soaked into earth instead of drowning it. Laura walked the length of the cabin porch with her cane, testing her strength. Liam followed her with a watchful eye. Lydia ran circles around them, pretending the puddles were lakes full of mermaids. But the calm cracked 2 days later when a rider appeared. He wasn't from town, his hat too fine, his horse too clean. Liam met him at the gate. "You Liam Anderson?" "That's right." The man pulled a folded note from his vest, words scrawled in a harsh hand. Liam read it once, then twice. His jaw set like stone. "Roy Callan's alive," the messenger said. "Says you got something that belongs to him." Liam tore the note in half and handed the man 2 coins for his ride. "Tell him I'm not in the habit of returning what he's thrown away." The messenger smirked. "Ain't sure he'll take that kindly." Liam's eyes darkened. "He can take it however he pleases." The man rode off without another word, and Liam stood there a long while, the wind tugging at his coat. When he turned back, Laura was in the doorway, her face pale. "He'll come," she said. "He always comes when someone stands between. Maybe he'll find the road too long this time." But both of them knew roads in the West were never long enough to stop a cruel man. That evening, the air felt heavier, charged with something unseen. Liam fixed the latch on the barn door, fed the animals, then returned to find Laura sewing by lantern light. She'd mended his torn sleeve, the one he'd ripped hauling fence posts weeks ago. Her stitches were small, precise, almost tender. "You didn't have to," he said. She smiled faintly. "Maybe I wanted to." He looked at the sleeve, then at her. "You planning to leave before he finds you?" Her hands paused midair. "If I go, he'll hunt me again. If I stay, he'll hunt you too." "Then we're already hunted," he said. "Might as well stand where the ground's ours." She lowered her eyes. You talk like a man who's not afraid of dying. I'm more afraid of living wrong. The words sat between them, soft but unshakable. That night, the storm returned in earnest, wind whistling through the gaps of the shutters. Lydia crawled into Laura's bed, whispering about monsters. Her mother stroked her hair, murmuring that monsters die when daylight comes. But she didn't believe it. Not yet. Liam couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, cleaning his revolver, though he hoped he'd never use it. Every few minutes, he glanced at the window, watching lightning stitch the sky. In the distance, coyotes howled. Somewhere beyond that sound was a man he hadn't met but already knew, the kind who broke women and called it law. At dawn, he saddled his horse and rode into town again. The street was slick with mud, the saloon's door swinging lazily in the wind. When he entered the store, conversation halted. Men shifted uncomfortably, tipping hats, pretending they hadn't been talking about him. He bought flour, sugar, cartridges. Paid double, left the change. The clerk cleared his throat. Heard word from over east. Roy Callan's been boasting. Says he's riding this way. Liam looked up, calm but cold. Let him ride. When he returned home, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Laura stood by the fence line, hair loose, dress catching the wind. She looked fragile against the vastness of the land, yet something in her stance, chin lifted, eyes steady, spoke of defiance. He dismounted, handed her the parcel. "Town's talking," he said. "They always do," she answered. He wanted to say more but didn't. The world between them was a thin thread of things unsaid, tightening each day. As twilight came, the prairie filled with the hum of crickets. Lydia fell asleep near the hearth again, holding the small wooden horse Liam had carved for her. Laura tucked a blanket around her, then turned to him. "Thank you for letting us stay." "You don't owe thanks," he said. "Maybe not. But it feels right." She smiled faintly, and in that smile was something dangerous. Hope. Outside, the wind shifted. From the far ridge came a faint echo, like hooves hitting hard ground. Liam froze, listening. The rhythm was steady, distant, but growing. He stepped onto the porch, eyes narrowing toward the dark line of the horizon. The sound of the hooves faded, then returned, sharper this time. 3 riders, maybe 4. Laura appeared behind him, wrapping her shawl tight. "Is it them?" He didn't answer. The storm had passed, but the sky carried its memory. He watched the distant flicker of torchlight near the ridge and whispered, almost to himself, "They've found us." The night swallowed the words whole. The wind had a strange weight that morning, a restless pull that bent the grass in one long direction, as if the land itself were bracing. Liam could feel it before he saw the clouds. The air was too still, too watchful. Birds had fled the fence-line. Even the creek moved quieter, as if it too understood that peace in the west was never more than a pause. He rose before dawn, checked the horses, stacked wood by the door. Every movement was deliberate, quiet. Inside the cabin, Laura stirred a pot of oats while Lydia slept near the fire, her braid undone, her cheek pink from dreams. The sight softened something inside him he didn't want softened. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Not rightly," he answered. Laura didn't press. She'd learned that his silences said more than most men's words. But she saw the way his jaw set, the faint tremor in his left hand when he poured water into the tin cup. She knew that kind of fear, the kind you don't admit to keep the others steady. When the first crack of thunder whispered across the far ridge, she looked up from the pot. He didn't move. "They're coming, aren't they?" He nodded. "Maybe not today. Maybe tomorrow. But they're coming." She set the spoon down slowly. "We could leave." "And go where?" he asked. "Anywhere there's no noise of hooves behind us." He turned toward the window. The horizon stretched wide, clouds heavy and moving low. "There's no such place. Not for folks like us." She didn't argue. They'd both been chased before, him by ghosts, her by men. Running only ever made the world smaller. By noon, he saddled the horse and rode down to the creek with Lydia. She clung to his waist, her laughter light against the wind. He showed her how to whistle through her fingers, how to listen for echo. "If you ever hear that whistle twice," he told her, "you ride to the town and find Deputy Reeves." She frowned. "Why?" "Just promise me," he said. "I promise." Her voice carried through the valley, and for a fleeting heartbeat, he let himself believe it might always sound that way, clear and safe and young. Back at the cabin, Laura swept the porch, her body stronger now, her steps steady despite the cane. Liam watched her from the corral. Every gesture she made had quiet purpose, as though she were stitching herself back into the world piece by fragile piece. "You're healing fast," he said as he passed. She smiled faintly. "Maybe the land likes me." "It likes anyone who listens," he said. She paused, studying him. "And who listens to you?" "Liam Anderson." He didn't answer. She didn't need him to. That evening, clouds thickened until the sky turned the color of pewter. The air grew warm, then sharp, like breath before tears. Liam repaired the window latch while Laura mended a blanket by the fire. Lydia played with her wooden horse, humming to herself. When thunder rumbled again, Liam looked up. "You believe in omens?" he asked. "I used to," she said. "Then I married a man who said God spoke only to him." He met her eyes, something like sorrow flickering there. "You think he still speaks?" "Maybe. Just not in the ways we expect." Silence drifted between them, soft as smoke. He poured coffee, set a cup beside her. "You asked once why I live alone." She nodded, waiting. "I had a wife," he said. "Anna. She died in winter 3 years ago. Fever took her and the boy she was carrying. Buried them under a willow by the creek. Haven't had much reason to speak since." Laura's needle stilled. "I'm sorry." He shrugged lightly, though his voice carried the tremor of old grief. "The land remembers them better than I do. I see her in the fog some mornings. She never looks back." Laura's eyes glistened in the firelight. "I think she'd be proud you're still kind. Kindness don't bring back the dead." "No," she whispered, "but it keeps the living from joining them too soon." Outside, lightning split the sky, white and violent, the kind that erases the line between heaven and earth. The sound rolled through the hills like drums. Lydia startled, dropping her toy. Liam moved to the window and peered out. "The storm's turning," he said. "Coming down from the north." "How bad?" "Bad enough to keep sane men indoors." She smiled faintly. "Then Roy won't wait." He glanced at her, surprised by the steel beneath her calm. "You know him better than I do," she said quietly. "He'll come when the world looks weakest. That's how he works." Liam nodded slowly. "I'll be ready." He spent the next hour moving the animals into the barn, tightening the ropes, checking the rifle. Laura watched him from the doorway, her shawl clutched tight. He looked bigger in the lightning flashes, carved from something older than fear. When he returned, she was waiting with a bowl of stew. "You should eat." He hesitated, then took it. Her hand brushed his wrist as she passed it to him. The contact lingered longer than either meant it to. "Lydia's asleep," Laura said softly. "She dreams better here." He swallowed the food slowly, the taste of salt and smoke filling his mouth. "I'm glad for that." "You don't talk much," she said after a while. "Words aren't my trade." "What is?" "Keeping things alive." She looked toward the sleeping child, then back at him. "Then maybe you've already done it." He met her gaze, and for a breath the world outside, the thunder, the rain, the fear, faded. It was just two people who'd known too much hurt, finding something steady in the wreckage. Later, when the wind began to howl and rain hissed against the roof, she sat near him by the fire. He unwrapped an old cloth from his hand, a revolver, clean but aged. "Haven't fired this in years," he said. She looked at it, then at him. "I won't let him take you, Liam." He smiled sadly. "I'm not the one he wants." "Then he's a fool." He set the gun down carefully. "That he is. But fools have killed better people than me." The fire flared, its light catching the scar across his temple. She reached out, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, then pulled back, embarrassed. "Forgive me," she whispered. For what? For hoping this place could be home. He turned to her, his voice low. Maybe it already is. Outside, thunder cracked so loud it shook dust from the rafters. They both looked toward the window. The night pulsed with light, revealing the dark sweep of the hills beyond. For a moment, Liam thought he saw movement, shadows shifting where none should be. But when he looked again, the darkness was still. He set another log on the fire. The flames climbed, warm and defiant. Laura leaned against the chair's arm, her head near his shoulder. The smell of her hair, lavender soap and smoke, cut through the damp air. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. You ever think the land keeps secrets for us? Maybe it just waits for us to tell the truth, he said. What's yours, Liam? He looked into the fire, eyes distant. That I stopped believing I deserved company. Then you showed up, and the house stopped feeling like punishment. She smiled faintly, tears glinting. Then we both misjudged the world. The storm outside rose to a roar, rattling shutters, shaking the walls. Lydia whimpered in her sleep. Laura rose, laid a hand over her daughter's heart until she quieted. When she turned back, Liam was at the door, lantern in hand. Where are you going? Barn door's loose. Can't let it swing. She moved toward him. Let it be. Can't. He opened the door, wind slamming into him, coat whipping. Rain drove sideways across the land. He stepped out into it, boots sinking in the mud. Laura watched from the threshold as he fought the storm's pull, lantern glow flickering in the dark. His shape blurred into the rain until only the light remained, a lone star against the fury. When he returned, soaked and shivering, she was waiting with a towel and blanket. He didn't protest when she pressed them to his shoulders. Her fingers trembled as they brushed his neck. You shouldn't have gone out, she said. Can't stand by while things break. Neither can I, she whispered. They stood close, the sound of rain muffled around them. He looked down at her, and for a breath something wordless passed between them, an understanding older than fear. He wanted to tell her she was safe, but the words stuck. Instead, he said quietly, tomorrow we move the horses closer to the ridge. Just in case. She nodded, though she already knew what just in case meant. The storm raged until dawn. When it finally broke, the world outside was silver and still. Puddles mirrored the pale sky, and the grass bent under the weight of rain. Liam stepped onto the porch, watching the light crawl back over the hills. Behind him, Laura stood at the doorway, hair loose, face pale but calm. How long till they come? She asked. He watched the horizon. Not long now. And as he spoke, faint and steady through the morning hush came the sound they both feared most. 3 horses riding hard through the wet valley, their silhouettes black against the newborn sun. The morning rose gray and trembling, the kind of stillness that lives before violence. The wet earth shone like tarnished metal beneath the pale sky, and every sound, the drip of water from the eaves, the breath of the horse in the pen, felt too loud. Liam Anderson stood on the porch, his coat half-buttoned, rifle in hand. Laura was behind him, one hand gripping the doorframe, the other holding Lydia close. The girl's heartbeat fluttered against her mother's ribs like a bird desperate to stay hidden. 3 riders appeared on the ridge, silhouettes against the pale dawn. They didn't hurry. Men who believe the world owes them never do. Roy Callan rode at the front, thick-shouldered, his face half-shadowed by a wide hat. The other 2, his brothers, flanked him with that lazy arrogance that came from cruelty made familiar. They looked at the cabin the way wolves look at a wounded deer. Liam stepped down from the porch, mud sucking at his boots. He didn't raise the rifle yet. He simply stood there, a tall, unmoving shape against the light. The wind tugged at his coat, making the fabric breathe like a living thing. Roy halted 10 yards away, dismounting with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. You Anderson? Liam nodded. Roy spat into the dirt. Heard you been keeping my wife and kid. Mighty generous. Laura's breath caught. Lydia pressed her face into her skirt. Liam spoke quietly. You left them to die. That's so? Roy said, swaggering forward. Woman's place is where her husband puts her. She ran off. Took my property with her. She ain't property, Liam said, voice low. Roy chuckled, a cruel, hollow sound. That what you tell yourself when you're warming her bed? Liam didn't answer. He simply shifted his weight, a movement small enough to make Roy step back without realizing he'd done it. You gonna hand her over, Anderson, or we burn this shack down and take what's ours? Liam's gaze didn't waver. She's not going anywhere with you. Roy's eyes gleamed with something dark. You think this is your business? You think you can play hero out here? I think a man who beats a woman don't get to call himself one, Liam said. Roy's hand shot to his pistol. Liam didn't flinch. The rifle in his hand rose with quiet precision, barrel leveled at the man's chest. Behind him, Laura whispered, Liam, please. He didn't look back. Go inside. But, no. Her hand trembled as she pulled Lydia through the doorway, shutting it behind her. The latch clicked softly, like the tick of a clock counting down to something inevitable. The two brothers shifted in their saddles, uncertain. Roy sneered. You think you can take us all, old man? Liam's voice was calm. I don't have to. Just the first one who tries. The standoff stretched. Seconds turned heavy as stone. Rain began to fall again. Slow, deliberate drops that darkened the dirt. The smell of wet pine filled the air. Roy moved first. His gun cleared its holster halfway before Liam fired. The sound tore the quiet open, echoing across the valley. Roy stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, rage twisting his face. Kill him, he screamed. The brothers dismounted, drawing their weapons. Liam dropped behind a trough, reloaded fast. The first bullet grazed his arm. The second shattered the post beside him. He rolled to the side, fired once. One brother fell hard into the mud. The other cursed and took cover behind a wagon, shooting wild. Inside, Laura pressed her back against the door, shaking. Lydia clung to her skirt, sobbing. Mama, make them stop. Laura swallowed her terror, forcing her voice steady. Pray quiet, baby. Pray he stands tall. She glanced toward the window. Through the smoke and rain she saw Liam, bleeding from his arm but still upright, still steady. Roy staggered to his horse, grabbing a rifle from the saddle. He fired at the cabin, shattering a window. Glass rained down over Laura and Lydia. Laura's scream caught in her throat. That broke something in Liam. He stepped into the open, rifle aimed true. Another shot cracked through the rain. Roy's weapon flew from his hand. He howled, collapsing to his knees. The last brother tried to run, but his horse spooked and bolted. The world fell silent except for the hiss of rain and Roy's ragged breathing. Liam approached him slowly, rifle lowered now. You done, Roy. Go before the ground decides it don't want your weight. Roy spat blood, eyes burning with hate. You think this changes anything? The law don't care about who hit who. You're harboring a runaway wife. You'll hang for this. Liam stared at him, face unreadable. Maybe. But at least the hanging'll be honest. Roy lunged suddenly, grabbing the knife at his boot. Laura's shout cut through the rain. Liam twisted aside, the blade grazing his side. He slammed the rifle but into Roy's face, once, twice. The man fell back, half-conscious, blood mixing with mud. Behind them, the door creaked open. Laura stood there, pale, barefoot, her cane clenched in her fist. Stop, Liam, she said softly. He froze, chest heaving. He's done, she whispered. Let the Lord take him. Liam looked down at Roy, the broken man who had nearly broken everything around him. Then he threw the rifle aside, breath shaking, and stepped back. Roy laughed weakly, a sound that curdled in his throat. You're both fools. You think this ends here? Laura walked toward him slowly. Her feet sank in the mud, her hair whipped by wind. She stopped a step away and looked down. You always thought pain made you strong, she said quietly. But it only made you small. She raised the cane and struck once. Roy flinched, rolling away, trying to stand. His boot caught in the stirrup of his frightened horse. The animal reared, pulling him off balance. In seconds, it was dragging him down the slope, his shouts fading into the storm's roar. Laura stood frozen, rain streaming down her face, unsure if what she felt was victory or grief. Liam stepped toward her, steadying her by the arm. "You're shaking." She looked up at him. "So are you." He smiled faintly, though his eyes were glassy with pain. "Maybe I'm human after all." They turned toward the cabin. Lydia was at the door, crying. When Liam reached her, she threw her arms around his waist, pressing her face into his chest. "You're hurt," she said. He brushed her hair gently. "Not too bad." Laura helped him inside. He sat by the fire, blood darkening his shirt. She tore a sheet into bandages, her hands trembling but sure. As she wrapped his wound, he studied her face, rain and tears indistinguishable. "You saved me," he murmured. She shook her head. "No, you saved yourself. I just reminded you why." The fire crackled. Outside, the storm began to drift east, its fury spent. The land smelled clean, like the world had been washed for the first time in years. When the sun finally broke through, it painted the hills gold. The willow behind the cabin shimmered with rain. Liam walked out to it, moving slow, one hand pressed to his side. Laura followed, Lydia skipping barefoot in the wet grass. He knelt at the base of the tree, touching the bark. She realized it was the place where his wife and child rested. He spoke softly, almost to the wind. "I reckon the earth's wide enough for second chances." Laura laid her hand beside his. "Maybe that's what mercy looks like." He turned toward her, eyes steady. "You think you'll stay?" She looked around. The cabin, the hills, the child chasing sunbeams. "I don't know where else there is." "Then it's settled." He rose, wincing slightly, and together they walked back to the cabin. Smoke rose gentle from the chimney, carrying the smell of life rather than loss. Weeks later, the townsfolk came riding, Deputy Reeves at the lead. They'd heard of the fight. They found Roy's brothers gone, Roy himself miles downstream, broken but alive enough to stand trial. The deputy eyed Liam. "Heard you stood your ground, Anderson. Some say too firm." Liam met his gaze. "Some things are worth standing for." The man nodded slowly. "Can't argue that." When they left, the valley felt quiet again, but not empty. Laura hung fresh linens on the line, Lydia picked wildflowers by the fence, and Liam mended a post that didn't really need mending. The air smelled of spring and redemption. That evening, as the sun sank red over the prairie, Laura stood beside him on the porch. The horizon shimmered with heat, distant thunder rolling somewhere far but harmless now. She said softly, "You think peace ever lasts?" He looked at her hand resting near his, their fingers brushing. "Maybe not. But it's worth living while it does." Lydia came running up with her bouquet, daisies, yellow and wild. She pressed them into Liam's rough palm. "For you," she said shyly. He knelt, smiling. "For all of us, little one." The last of the light caught the three of them in gold, the kind of gold that feels earned. The land was silent, holding its breath one final time before night. And somewhere beyond that stillness, an old voice seemed to whisper, the West was never tamed by guns or greed, but by the quiet hands that chose to heal instead of hurt. So if you're hearing this by your own fire tonight, tell me, where are you watching from? Somewhere the wind still hums through open fields, where the storms come and go but mercy stays. Leave your name below, and keep walking with us down this trail of stories, each one braver than the last.